What's up, everybody? Bloody Bill Box coming at you once again. Dropkicks and Joysticks, episode 7. We're gonna have ourselves a little bit of a feature on an old-time classic. But before we jump into the episode this week, let's talk a little bit about current stuff. The current stuff that is on the radar, we got one from WWE and one from AEW. So we'll start with the WWE one, because by the time this episode drops, there may have been another development, because as we record, it is the Tuesday before the upcoming editions of both AEW Dynamite and Friday Night SmackDown. So the August 16th edition of Dynamite will be in the rearview mirror by the time this episode drops. But as I record it, it is yet to happen. But anyway, same thing with SmackDown. We're a couple days away from that. And by the time this drops, it'll be a couple days old. So some of what I say about these various situations may not even apply by the time this episode drops on Monday, August the 21st, which is the day you're listening to it. Maybe, if you listen on the day it drops. Anyway, in WWE, this past Friday night on SmackDown, the most recent episode, before the most recent episode, what was the date on that bad boy there? The August 11th edition of SmackDown. There we go. On the August 11th edition of SmackDown, we got a little bit of an explanation about why Jimmy Uso did what he did at SummerSlam. He did it out of love. He didn't want Jey Uso to become a egotistical douchebag like his cousin Roman. Yeah, I'm not sure that explanation does it for me. And it didn't do it for Jey either, because afterwards he super kicked the ever-living hell out of everybody, except for Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman managed not to catch one, but Roman caught one, Solo caught one, Jey caught a brutal one. I'm sorry, Jimmy caught a brutal one on the floor. Looked like he was dead. Looked like he was dead on the mat. And then Jey looked into the camera and said, out of the bloodline, out of SmackDown, out of WWE, deuces, ooses, or ooses, deuces. I can't remember the order. But either way, the short version is Jey Uso quit WWE. A lot of people are speculating online that his contract is actually coming up, and this might be a real quitting of WWE. And I just look at it and I say, they wouldn't have televised him if he was really quitting the company. And they wouldn't have followed him out of the arena. They would have been like, oh, we just had a guy quit on live television, cut to black. They wouldn't have followed that. That's my opinion anyway. So it's interesting to see what will happen now that Jey has quote-unquote quit WWE. They moved him to the alumni section. When this episode drops, we will probably have an answer as to what sort of movement forward things are going to make. Or is it just going to cool off completely for a little while? Or are we going to pivot to a Roman versus Jimmy match? Or Solo versus Jimmy? You know, what's going to happen with the dynamic of those three? So the August 18th edition of SmackDown will have likely shed some answers on this. So as this episode drops and you listen, we probably know a little bit more. But I'm not fully convinced on the reasoning for Jimmy doing what he did. Interesting choice. Even I read an interview that Roman did talking about the dynamic of twins, how there is an older and a younger brother in the pair. And Jimmy apparently is the older brother. He was born first. So you could look at it from that big brother perspective, but after everything that they went through with Roman and the bloodline and breaking free, it seems an odd choice. I don't know, maybe Big Brother, like I said, I speculated that it could be a brotherly thing, but, maybe Big Brother could have helped steer him away from being an egotistical douchebag, and maybe it doesn't work. And that's how we get the Uso versus Uso WrestleMania match that they have talked about having a dream of having someday. So I'll continue to hold out hope with this one, but it does feel like things are kind of wearing down. Paul Heyman claims it's in the bottom of the third. I don't know. We got to at least be into the fourth inning now with Jey Uso quitting. And it makes you wonder if Heyman really believes it's in the bottom of the third, or at least we've moved into the fourth, I would say. If we're only in the fourth inning, what else is going to happen with this story to keep people interested? It's still keeping people interested, but I'm starting to notice more and more chatter about how it's losing its steam. And it's been really awesome for a really long time. So, all good things must come to an end eventually, but you hope that it ends with a wrestling story anyway, that it ends with a bang and not a whisper, but we'll see. Over on the AEW side, positive news. I'm going to give them two. Positive news, they are continuing to break live event records with the ticket sales for All In on August 27th. As of this morning, they had crossed 80,000. They had broken the reported ticket gates for SummerSlam in 92 and then WrestleMania 3. Ticket sale numbers are always a source of controversy. WWE allegedly pumps their numbers up. I say allegedly because I've not seen where people have said they admit to pumping their numbers. And I had seen somebody say, oh, well, you can't lie about your attendance because that's messing with your financials. I got where they were coming from in that argument, but it was kind of like, well, if I give out a bunch of freebies, it's, I guess maybe, I don't know, maybe now as I think about it, those tickets do have a value, but it's not realized income. I know I'm straying here thinking accounting. I have a degree in accounting, but my memory is very horrible. So I don't work in that field. But when it comes to live events, when you buy a ticket, the performer does not realize that income until the event happens. So in a sense, it's almost like a deposit. So if the concert or the show doesn't happen, they don't get paid on those ticket sales because those ticket sales will be refunded. So when it comes to freebies, though, this is where I would get cloudy. And I'm sorry, we're having an accounting discussion here to kick things off, but I wonder if those freebies can be assigned a no value because they're not intended to be sold, and that's how they can pump it up without faking out the financials. Because I got the argument, you can't claim 101,000 tickets were sold and not have the money to reflect 101,000 tickets sold. With pumping up the numbers like that for the television number where, they count everybody in the building. But regardless of that discussion that keeps going on, which events it's truly breaking, do the Korea events count because they were forced attendance and blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, what people should be focusing on is the fact that AEW, for all the challenges that it's facing, for the waning live attendance here in North America, because they do a little bit of Canada, but they didn't draw all that well. Considering all these challenging factors, for them to do 80,000 tickets, it doesn't matter what records they're breaking ultimately, because it leads to more of that tribalism that I just try to avoid in wrestling. It's such a milestone for the company. Their first major overseas event, because you can't say international because they've run Canada, but their first major overseas event is going to have over 80,000 people there. That's exciting. What's not exciting is apparently this CM Punk and Elite and Hangman Page drama is popping off yet again. Saturday night, August the 12th, after the Collision tapings, CM Punk went on a little bit of a rant. He said that he went to a local store and found out why Hangman Adam Page is called Hangman, and that's because all of his action figures are hanging on the peg. He's a shelf warmer. He doesn't move merchandise or sell toys. Woof. Of course, everybody's all upset about it. There's a lot of chatter and discourse, and if it was not something planned amongst parties, that is a pretty rough shot to take, but it's also kind of true. And I don't mean to sound that disparagingly. There we go. Whoops. But both Walmarts that I happen to check, because that's where AEW figures are carried most in my area, had a bunch of Hangman Adam Page figures. When the CM Punk figures rolled along, they were gone in a moment. In fact, I snapped one up just because I thought it was an interesting collectible situation. Walmart exclusive, one of his first figures back in so many years. I've got it somewhere. So there was fact in it, and that's why I think maybe to some degree people are a little upset about it, because he spoke in a fact that you wouldn't normally use in a wrestling angle, and allegedly he was trying to get a wrestling angle cooking. He's trying to get heat, trying to be a heel. Figures if he's going to get booed by the elite fans, then he might as well play into it. I guess, according to the rumor and innuendo, he's been politicking to become a heel again and thought this was the way. And as of this morning, I actually had read that he apparently reached out to Hangman Adam Page to apologize because the whole deal didn't come off the way that he was hoping it was going to come off, and he knows it looks bad and that it did not do what he was intending. We don't know how Hangman Adam Page has responded as of this morning, but the August 16th edition of Dynamite may provide some answers, depending on what the response is during the show or even after the show. In my opinion, there's two ways that this can be going. And I know people will say that I'm stupid for even looking at it like this, but one of the things that keeps me loving pro wrestling is the fact that you can never really truly be sure how dead or not kayfabe really is. Maybe it's the conspiracy theorist in me, but I truly believe sometimes what we see on social media is still driven by the promoters. They understand social media. They know how it works. They know how to use it to their benefit. They've done it with angles before people were questioning if it was real or not. I'm not saying necessarily that that's the case here, because the alternative to this is that it was a blown shoot and it's just made the situation worse. But what if? What if this is one of the most elaborate works in company history? What if they've already sat in a room? What if they've already come to their agreements? What if this is all by design right now? What if they are working all the dirt sheets? What if they are working all the fans? Wouldn't it be actually something if these guys have already sat down and said, listen, last year in Chicago was fucked up. We all fucked up. It should have never happened. But how can we repair? And then how can we rebuild? And then how can we capitalize? That might be giving too much credit. That might just be me fantasy booking out my ass. But it seems very strange that with All In on the horizon, and more importantly, All Out on the horizon, that all of a sudden these issues are blowing to a head. Because where did the fight happen last year? That would be Chicago in All Out. Where are they going to be again for All Out this year? Chicago. The timing seems rather suspect to me. And I could be wrong. I'll even go so far as to say I'm probably wrong. But what if I'm not? What if the rest of us who think that maybe there's a sliver of a chance that they might be trying to work? What if we're not wrong? It's a match that people have been wanting to see ever since last year. And what if, it's a big what if, but what if at All In, CM Punk is the reason FTR keeps the AEW Tag Team You get Kenny and the Bucks against CMFTR. Or if Kenny is going to be tied up with somebody else, because I hear his matches might already be lined up, Hangman and the Bucks against CMFTR. Anarchy in the Arena or whatever. You know, give it some Chicago name. I don't know. If this is not some sort of elaborate work, and like I said, I'm probably wrong in that, but I just keep holding out hope. And like I said, I never know how dead kayfabe truly is, just because that's the beauty of pro wrestling. You know, as they say, if you're not working, you're being worked. And that may not apply here. But what if it does? Anyway, spent a lot of time here in the front end talking about current events. So we're going to go ahead and move along to this week's feature. Yes, indeed, this week's feature is Showdown, Legends of Wrestling on the PlayStation 2. Me oh my, me oh my. What a game this was. I'm letting the intro run, but I can't play the audio because it's Quiet Riot, Bang Your Head, or whatever. You know the song. Envision it in your mind as you watch this video if you're on YouTube. But what a way to start this game. Came out June 22nd, 2004. It was released on the PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox. Published by Acclaim, developed by Iguana Entertainment for both. Something new that I'm going to start doing with each episode is sharing the ratings. Didn't seem to be a ton of ratings that I could find for this one. But GameSpot gave it a 6.5 out of 10. Honest Gamers, never heard of those guys, but for the sake of including an extra rating, they gave it a 3 out of 10. And IGN gave it a 5.9 out of 10. Personally, I think a 6 or a 6.5 is fair. Even the 5.9 is generally fair. As always, at the top, I like to cite that SmackDown Hotel is a big source of my information here. In fact, most of what I use here comes from them, with the exception this week of an attires list that I found in a Google search, because I did not remember all the various attires that were featured in this game. So Showdown Legends of Wrestling was the third in the Legends of Wrestling series that had been released on the PlayStation 2 and Xbox. The first two titles, of course, were just Legends of Wrestling and Legends of Wrestling 2. But instead of going for Legends of Wrestling 3, they kind of revamped the entire series with this one. Simpler controls, better graphics, more details, enhanced modes. Acclaim was really looking to deliver a super comprehensive wrestling game in 2004. And we had already seen some really great titles in wrestling video games up to that point, from WWE's SmackDown series, the Nintendo 64 series, even some of the WCW games. Well, not some, the two that were on the Nintendo 64, because they're PlayStation 1 games. They were okay. But we had seen a lot of great games. But this one here was the first time that we were going to see actual licensed arenas. And to me, that's what made it stand out, because obviously this was the third in the line. So it's not like a collection of Legends was anything new, because they had done it twice already, expanding the roster every single time. Like, they'd lose a few, but they'd gain a few. So the roster was changing every single time. But what made it stand out to me was the fact that it was going to be full of actually licensed and mimicked arenas. So we weren't going to say it looked like Madison Square Garden. We were going to say it was Madison Square Garden in New York City. Reading the description here, let me tell you a little bit more about this, because I'll go on about the arenas all day long, and we'll never actually get into the other stuff. So let me tell you a bit about the features, and then we can have my arena fanboy markout moment in just a little while. I could feel the excitement. I was like, wait a minute. In my brain, a little voice went off. It was like, hey, guy, I know you're excited to talk about all your arenas because you love arenas. And we'll tell that story in a little bit. But you got to talk about features and the roster and the attires and that sort of stuff first. And then you can go wild on your arenas. Okay? All right. So, courtesy of SmackDown Hotel, this is the description that they have on their website. And then we'll go into the features as well. But it says, Showdown Legends of Wrestling is a wrestling video game sequel to Legends of Wrestling 2. It is the third and last chapter of the Legends of Wrestling series. Side note, that's sad to me. I would have loved to have seen it continue, but WWE starts snapping up a lot of these legends with their 2K deals. Showdown Legends of Wrestling is the exclusive supercard of the Immortals. Battle through the annals of time, clashing with the greatest grapplers to set foot in the squared circle. Unlock classic feuds, create dream matches, and travel down the path in the first ever era-based career mode, which is what you're seeing on your screen if you're watching on YouTube. See if you have what it takes to beat the icons of professional wrestling. And the icons of professional wrestling in this game were lengthy. 73 different legends included in this game. 73 legends, all of whom had 4 different attires. And that's something that I completely forgot existed with this game. Like, I knew that there were some alternate attires, but I forgot that each character in this game had 4 different attires. Because the roster is so lengthy, I don't think I'm going to list off the entire, but I'll list off some of the highlights. You know what? Screw it. We can do it. Let's see how fast we can do it. Here's the roster of 73 legends, and it's quite the eclectic mix, and that's one of the other things that makes this game stand out. So here we go. In alphabetical order, we have Abdullah the Butcher, Andre the Giant, Andy Kaufman, Bam Bam Bigelow, Baron Von Raschke, Big John Studd, Superstar Billy Graham, Bob Backlund, Bobby the Brain Heenan, Bob Orton Jr., Bret the Hitman Hart, Brian Knobbs, Brian Pillman, British Bulldog, Bruno Sammartino, Captain Lou Albano, Kurt Hennig, DDP, Don Morocco, Dory Funk Jr., Dusty Rhodes, The Dynamite Kid, Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, Eddie Guerrero, Fritz Von Erich, George the Animal Steel, The Grand Wizard, Greg the Hammer Valentine, Harley Race, Hulk Hogan, Ivan Koloff, Ivan Putski, Jake Roberts, Jerry Lawler, Jerry Sags, Jim Duggan, Jimmy Hart, Jimmy Snuka, Kerry Von Erich, Kevin Von Erich, Killer Kowalski. 41 before I needed to catch my breath. Not bad. King Kong Bundy, Coco Beware. Now I'm laughing at the fact that, Jesus. Mil Mascaris, Mr. Fuji. Where's Mr. Fuji? Nikita Koloff, Nikolai Volkov. Jeez, those two back-to-back. Nikita Koloff, Nikolai Volkov. I'm surprised I didn't mess that up. One-man gang, Owen Hart. And the fun note about Owen Hart was up until this year's AEW Fight Forever, this was the last wrestling game that he appeared in after his passing. Paul Orndorff, Randy Savage, Rick Martel, Rick Rude, Rick Steiner, Ricky Morton, Ricky Steamboat, Road Warrior Animal, Road Warrior Hawk, Robert Gibson, Rocky Johnson, Roddy Piper, Sabu, Scott Steiner, Sid Vicious, Steve Williams, Sting, Ted DiBiase, Terry Funk, the Iron Sheik, the Sheik, Tito Santana, Tony Atlas, and the Ultimate Warrior, who was making he was a big deal being a part of this release because he was supposed to be in the, I believe it was SmackDown Shut Your Mouth or Here Comes the Pain, and he successfully challenged to have his likeness removed from the game. At that point in time, WWE and Warrior had quite the contentious relationship, and things just were not going well. So he yanked himself off of WWE games and got himself put into Showdown Legends of Wrestling. Of course, the Ultimate Warrior would be and still is in WWE games again. But at this time, that was a major get for the Showdown series as they look to expand the roster every time. Although, of course, this was the, as they noted, it was the final chapter in the series because Acclaim, of course, would kind of have a lot of the wheels fall off, and they were even was it Acclaimed? I think Acclaimed was also behind Impact, or was that Midway? I might be confusing myself. We're gonna do some quickie research right here. But as I'm even saying it, I think Impact was a Midway game. Impact was a Midway game. What did happen to Acclaim then? We're doing live research. Oh, where'd it go? There we go. That's what it was. They filed bankruptcy in 2004. That's what it was. Like I said, I have horrible memory. We were talking about in that brief accounting excursion earlier. Terrible memory. And I thought it was bankruptcy, but I didn't want to incorrectly say something because, like, what if they were still doing business today, right? But getting back to the features of this game, because we just covered that long list of attire, or not the attires, because if I said the attires, that'd be another 200 and something things to say. But I'll give you an example, just because it's on this page. We got Tito Santana. His attires here say Survivor Series 90, Ariba 91, Strike Force, and El Matador. So those are the 4 different looks for Tito Santana. And then we got Macho Man Randy Savage. We got Madness 88, WrestleMania 7, NWO 97, Wolfpack 98. So, just spreading the eras there on the attires. But as we were saying there, this ended up being the final chapter. Getting back on track here. Sorry for the bouncing back and forth there, my friends. Final chapter of this game, which was really sad because, in my opinion, this version of Showdown, or not this version, this edition of the Legends of Wrestling series was the best that they put out. It catches a lot of heat from folks. A lot of people drag it and say that it was not good, it was repetitive, and you could make some arguments there, but in my book in 2004, it was trying to accomplish a lot. And I think it managed to accomplish a lot of what it set out to accomplish. It looked to refine the controls, and it did. Are things a little clunky? Is focus off at times? Absolutely. But is it miles easier to play compared to Legends of Wrestling 2? Absolutely. Like, Acclaim continued to keep that old WWF attitude, ECW Hardcore Revolution, that same old, tired, clunky 8-button input control system. And they finally did away with it for this game. And it may have led to some repetitiveness for some players, but as I pulled out the game to play it for recording the gameplay, I played some starter one-on-one matches, and I was discovering things that I had forgotten you could do in the game. And I don't know, everybody's gameplay experience is subjective, but this is one that I will hold up in a high regard each and every time. One of the other things that it wanted to do was expand upon the matches and refine them. Lots of different match types in this game. We had table matches, first blood matches, ladder, steel cage, Iron Man, battle royal, hardcore matches, 6 and 8 man tags, which were a little clunky, elimination matches, handicap matches, 3 and 4 way dances. With the multiple players, it can get clunky. Tag team matches are especially a pain in the ass. Like if you don't knock the other guy's partner off the apron first, you could be in some trouble going for some pins. But that's a lot of different match types. WWE was cranking out the match types as well in their games, but considering this was not a major promotions game, the match selection was on point. We had commentary from Tony Schiavone, Larry Sabisco, and Bobby the Brain Heenan. I would love to hear Tony Schiavone's experience working on this game versus working on a game that was for WWE. They deliver a lot of fun lines in this game. You can tell that it's when Bobby Heenan was starting to get not really sick, but he was starting to get sicker. You could hear his voice starting to be affected, but it's still really cool to hear Bobby the Brain Heenan providing commentary on a wrestling game in 2004. Because he wasn't doing commentary anywhere at that point in time. I think he was making sporadic appearances. So it's just fun to have Bobby Heenan, Zbyszko, and Schiavone. It's almost like a throwback to WCW in a way. We had a create a wrestler mode in this game as well. Not super detailed, but then again, at the time, none of them really were. But still, you can create yourself a legend, and you can take that legend into the ring, take it into the game modes. And the game mode, which you've been seeing on the screen if you're on YouTube, the Showdown Challenge, where you pick one of the legends in the game and you fight through the eras, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. And you just face various legends, go to the various venues, have various match types. Really fun. Because it's similar every time you play it, but the opponent mix and match is different every time. So right now on the screen, you're seeing Diamond Dallas Page going through the 70s. But if I were to pick, say, Dusty Rhodes, it would be a different mix for his 70s, 80s, and 90s compared to whatever mix Diamond Dallas Page is going to have. So that does increase the replay value of the game, in my opinion, because it's not like playing, say, and please don't come for me on this one, it's not like playing, say, a Mortal Kombat tower in the original games, where they might mix up some of the earlier levels, but it's the same crop of characters every time. In this one, at least, because there's so many characters in the game, it allows for a little more randomization to kind of mix things up. The mode at its base is the same every time. You're looking to wrestle your way through the various decades and become the champion of the era. But the opponents and the champions and your interactions, they're a little different every time. So that alone, paired with the simpler controls, make for hours upon hours of replay value, in my opinion. And one of the reasons that I feel like this game should be held in a little bit of a higher regard. Because every time I see it mentioned, they was like, has a great roster, but was terrible otherwise. I disagree. I kept this episode as one of the rare times where I recorded in advance on the gameplay, and I recorded all sorts of excess because I didn't know how long the episode would last. And I wanted to make sure I had enough gameplay. So tell me this game sucked, and I say I disagree with you, because every time I play this game, it leads to me playing it for hours. As I record this episode, it's a Tuesday afternoon. Monday Night Raw was on last night. I'm sitting here at the desk recording the gameplay. I've got Monday Night Raw muted in the background, and I'm playing Showdown in the foreground for like 2.5 hours. Playing random matches, going to the different venues, and I'll talk about all those venues in a hot minute. But getting back to the features, another cool thing about this game is because Jimmy Hart was involved, we ended up with a few actual theme songs in the game. A lot of them were produced by Jimmy for the game, but there are a lot of themes, 3 that come to mind that were actually used in WCW. We got the instrumental version of American Made for Hulk Hogan. We've got the WCW version of Pomp and Circumstance for the Macho Man. And while Kurt Hennig never used this theme song, it was used for Shawn Stasiak when he was trying to call himself like the Perfect One or the Perfect Event, or that was the tag team he was in. Either way, Shawn Stasiak used it. So Kurt Hennig kind of has his Mr. Perfect theme song in this. Another cool feature as we round out our features list is if you're looking to get a handle on how to play the game, you can go ahead and watch and learn in a tutorial that is voiced over by Bret the Hitman Hart. So Bret Hart is there for you to give you some help. Bret's there for you. He's there for you, babies. He's there. Now for the arenas. Oh my, oh my, oh my. The arenas. So the arenas are something, because I have never seen in a game before and never seen in a game since as many licensed, real named arenas as there are in this game. I think it's 18. Let me count my list before I go through it. Yeah, we got 18 different licensed arenas. So we'll start from the bottom and work our way up to the top. Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, Texas. Dory Funk's Gym in Ocala, Florida. The Greensboro Coliseum in Greensboro, North Carolina. The Sky Dome in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. The Cow Palace, San Francisco, California. The LA Sports Arena in Los Angeles, California. Legends Coliseum in Austin, Texas. The Cobo Arena in Detroit, Michigan. I don't know if this one is real, but the Moscow Arena from Moscow, Russia. It seems like too plain of a name, so maybe that's one of our generics. But then we got the Philadelphia Spectrum in Philadelphia. Texas Stadium in Irving, Texas. The Tokyo Dome in, well, Tokyo, Japan. The Omni from Atlanta. Speaking of AEW All In earlier, Wembley Stadium. We've got Wembley, London, England. The Pontiac Silver Dome in Pontiac, Michigan. Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto, so Toronto's represented twice in this game. My personal favorite, the Boston Garden in Boston, Massachusetts. In fact, the desktop screensaver on the computer that is sitting in front of me is a photo that circulates every so often of the final WWF event at the Boston Garden. So that goes to show how much I love that venue, and I am forever searching for the print of the demolition of the Boston Garden. It's a print that was done where half of the building still has all the lights, all the floor, all the seats. Everything is alive in one half, and the other half is all the rubble after they started tearing it down. It got tied up in litigation years ago because of something with the construction company. One of their workers was in it, and it led to the ability to sell this print being pulled. I've been told it's a wildly rare piece to find, and I've never seen it anywhere. I've never seen it listed. I've never seen it on somebody's walls. I've never seen it mentioned. I can find a picture of it here and there on Google, but that's about it. Anyway, I digress on my Boston Garden love. We can talk about all the love of the arenas very shortly. The last arena in Showdown Legends of Wrestling is Madison Square Garden, New York, New York. The arena list is what really stood out to me, and here we go. We're gonna go into the weeds on arenas and my love of sports arenas and stadiums and everything else, because I just gotta. The arena list in this game is what really stood out to me, because for as long as I can remember from the first moments that I began watching wrestling and sports, I've been enamored with the venues in which they take place, because these buildings and these stadiums have such character and such features about them. You know, the first time that I ever really stepped foot into an arena of any kind was the Boston Garden, June 6th, 1996, for a WWF house show. And it's an image that is forever burned in my brain, because when the lights were on, you could see all these tan seats and all the different signs and the banners. I'll never forget the banners. I loved the banners in the Boston Garden so much that I once tried to recreate that in my bedroom using notebook paper and a bunch of thumbtacks. I had a bunch of notebook paper, green markers, and yellow markers. I'm writing Boston Celtics, 1986 NBA champions, and throwing it up there. I'm making grids for these retirement numbers. Yeah, I loved the Boston Garden. And then Fenway Park was the next one that I got to step into in 1994. But what that did is it spawned a love of arenas. I long had dreams of going to many of these venues that have since been torn down, like the Pontiac Silverdome and Cobo Arena in Detroit, Texas Stadium. I think the Cal Palace is still kicking. Skydome's still kicking. Wembley obviously is still kicking. I think the Omni is still kicking. I mean, some of these venues are still kicking. But I didn't necessarily want to go to events of these venues. I wanted to go on tours, because I had been on a tour of the Boston Garden in 1995, right when they were getting ready to tear it down. In fact, that was where I bought the Boston Garden Banner Years banner. It was like a not even a 3x5. It's maybe a 24x36 banner, 2x3. I'm staring at one in my office now. But when I went on this tour, I got this banner for the first time, and I lost it over the years. And then I found it again on eBay, and it now hangs in my office like a banner in the corner of the room. But once I had gone on a tour of the Boston Garden, that's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to go on tours of these places. I got to go on a tour at Fenway Park. I got later on in 1996, 97 area, I went on a tour of Olympic Stadium in Montreal, Quebec. To this day, I remember the tour guide from that tour, because he had a very heavy French-Canadian accent. And, he's giving us all the facts and everything about the tour. And I say that I can do this impression because I am, in fact, a French-Canadian. I may not sound like it all that much, but, I am a French-Canadian. Check my last name. Anyway, the fact that I'll never forget about Olympic Stadium is, walking through, we're standing in the outfield. I remember the field. The big field was behind us. The Montreal Canadian Football League was practicing on the field at the time. And he says to us, he goes, so the Olympic Stadium, it was built with 30,000 tons of steel. I don't know why that's the one and only thing I remember from that tour, other than visiting where their little newsstand area where they did the broadcast for, I think it was CBC. That station beamed down into New Hampshire. So I used to be able to watch Montreal Canadiens hockey in French language on that channel. But anyway, from that young age, going on those tours, seeing all those arenas, watching sports, watching wrestling, I loved venues. And so when the wrestling games would come out, once they started hitting the PlayStation 2 era, namely WWE games, because they were the big guy in town, I'd look at that and say, oh, that looks like the Fleet Center in Boston, or oh, that looks like Madison Square Garden in New York. I even went through one thing where I was like, man, that looks like the Verizon Wireless Arena here in town. Like, are they really mimicking an arena from Manchester? I was like, maybe they're mimicking all the Northeast arenas in this game. But either way, I would see these and I'd be like, I would try to wager my guesses on what these arenas were, and it just brought me joy. Like, it's one of those weird facts about a person. I love sports arenas. I don't love them so much now. I mean, they're all beautiful. They're all high tech. They've got these giant video walls and everything. But the sports venues of old, they just had so much character. Even Madison Square Garden doesn't look like the same Madison Square Garden as much because you have to renovate these buildings. I get it. But like Fenway Park, for example, has managed to maintain a lot of its old charm while they've added seats to the Green Monster and while they've added seats in places I didn't know that they had seats in that place. When this game came out, I was in heaven. And that's one of the reasons that I still can continue to play this game to this day. It's 2023. This game came out a little over 19 years ago. I can still play it to this day, and I'm going to love it simply for the showcase challenge mode and for all of these frickin' arenas. Because you can just go on the character select screen and hit the random button, and boom, it picks you, your opponent, the venue, and you're ready to go. My review of this game, as we start to wrap up our discussion on Showdown Legends of Wrestling, my review of this game is Showdown Legends of Wrestling is the closest at the time to accomplishing something that I've always dreamed of in a wrestling game. I've always dreamed of a game with classic venues, classic wrestlers, and classic feuds, storylines, something built around an era. And I understood it would have probably had to be in a WWE setting for it to really bring in all the history, because they owned WCW history. They owned ECW history. They owned so much history that a game like Showdown, being unlicensed to, not licensed by a major promotion, I should say, they're not going to be able to necessarily capture all of that. And I still to this day hope WWE will do something like that someday. They've come really close with the 30 years of WrestleMania mode that they did in WWE 2K14. They did it a little bit with Legends of WrestleMania, which came out before 2K14. But nothing has quite accomplished it. But at the time, in 2004, this game accomplished as close as I was going to get. 73 legends, 18 different arenas, a bunch of different match types, commentary from Tony Schiavone, Larry Zbyszko, and Bobby the Brain Heenan. The only things that were really missing from this was branding. If WWE was behind this game, like, put this game in a WWE label with all these arenas, then introduce all the video library and everything they own, the game would have been wild. But it was wild without it. I'm not trying to say that it needed WWE to be better, but I'm saying imagine if the WWE assets were involved with the game. It would have been something else. But at the time, it was the largest assembly of Legends of the Ring to date. It brought Owen Hart back to a licensed video game after not being in anything since Attitude. I will admit the controls and the gameplay can be a little clunky. You've seen it in the video here. Focus can be off sometimes. Try to grab a guy, it doesn't happen. Try to throw a punch, you're just throwing a dead air. But I don't know, maybe I'm a forgiving man, but I can get around these things. This is still one of my favorite wrestling games of all time. I'll even go so bold as to say it would be in my top 10, maybe even my top 5. I've never really sat down to make a list of my favorite wrestling games, I will admit. But I would feel confident in saying that this game definitely cracks the top 10, maybe even cracks the top 5. Because I'll always be able to say that I love this game because of the arenas, because no game before it or after has ever gone out of their way to capture that part of wrestling history. WWE has done an amazing job through their showcase mode of capturing great moments in wrestling history, starting with WWE 13 in the Attitude Era mode, the 30 years of WrestleMania mode. What do we have? Cena and Punk. We had Triple H and Shawn Michaels. We've had John Cena's career, Daniel Bryan's career, the women's evolution. You know, we've captured a lot of fun stuff over there. But this game really put the focus into the places that these legendary moments happened. So for me, it's always going to be held in a high regard. So, you know, like I said, the controls can be clunky, the focus can be off. We can give argument to the idea that it can be repetitive. But like, here's what I wrote for, because I do notes for this because my memory issues. I realized that notes were going to be key for this. So here's what I wrote. I'm gonna just read what I wrote from my experience, so I don't keep trying to figure it out here. One could argue that it could get repetitive with the game modes, but it never bothered me. I loved playing the Eras mode with all the different legends, and if they had different versions of the legends, such as Crow Sting, Surfer Sting, for example, it was like an entirely different mode for me. When this game came out in 2004, I could not wait to get my hands on it after suffering through Legends of Wrestling 2 and those miserable-ass controls. And still to this day, in 2023, I love picking up this clunky masterpiece and throwing down some rounds at Madison Square Garden or the historic Boston Garden. I think that really sums it up best. It's a clunky masterpiece. And I think it deserves more love than it gets. And hopefully this episode here of Dropkicks and Joysticks has served to give you a nice plateful of love for Showdown Legends of Wrestling, because it's one of my all-time favorites, and it's been a joy sitting here talking about it. It was a joy picking it up and playing it for some gameplay. I might even stream it on Twitch or YouTube in the near future just to play it some more. But if you stumble across a copy out in the wild, I think this one tends to go for like $15-20. Last time I checked. Pick it up. I know I've said that about many of them, and I'm sure we'll get to games where I say, yeah, if you're a collector, pick it up, but otherwise you could do without. This one I say pick up. Definitely pick it up. Definitely throw down with it. Have some fun. Enjoy yourself. You know, there's little speed bumps to get over, but at the end of the day, this game still continues to offer me hours upon hours upon hours of enjoyment. And here we are 19 years later. I'm still talking about it, still loving it. So I think that's the proof in the pudding, or whatever they say. But on that discombobulated note, let's go ahead and bring this week's episode of Dropkicks and Joysticks to an end. Next week, we just talked about it a few moments ago. We're going to talk about it next week here on the show. We're going to talk about WWE 2K14 and all the fun modes that came with that one, namely the 30 years of WrestleMania mode, which, as this episode drops, I'm still in the middle of streaming over on twitch.tv/BloodyBillVox. Of course, I'm making the gameplay videos available on YouTube as well, so you can catch it live, you can catch it on demand, but 30 years of WrestleMania is actively being streamed as this episode is being recorded and as it drops. On the show next week, we'll talk about it in depth. Another one of those games that would definitely be in my top 10, definitely in my top 5, might even be in my top 3. Ooh, spicy. But until next week, my friends, it has been I, your host of Dropkicks and Joysticks, Bloody Bill Vox. If you'd like to keep up with me on social media, you could do so on a variety of platforms. If you're on one, just search Bloody Bill Vox. You'll see if I'm there. The major ones are X, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Those are the major ones. Of course, Twitch as well for live streaming. And if you're on YouTube, you know it. It's at Bloody Bill Vox. But until then being next week, have a great one out there, my friends. And I will see you next Monday, right here, for another fun and exciting and informational episode of Dropkicks and Joysticks.